and he had his internet cut back in March of this year for discussing issues on social media that could supposedly damage diplomatic relations. I mean, the most notable in my memory was the Catalonian independence. He was talking quite a bit about that, and that coincided perfectly with him getting booted off of the internet. Luckily, it was partially restored less than a week ago, but it's not enough. Now, for anyone who might be unaware, Assange more famously released Hillary Clinton's emails, John Podesta's emails, Huma Abedin's emails, and several other documents through Wikileaks prior to the 2016 election. Well, now he's suing Ecuador, accusing the government of violating his fundamental rights and freedoms. The case is expected to be heard next week in a domestic court. The argument is essentially that Ecuador tried to cut him off from the outside world after he sought refuge there following a bogus rape claim in Sweden that was later dropped. And Ecuador has also tried to use this protection that they granted him to get him to bend to their will. I mean, they've threatened him on numerous occasions saying that they'll remove the protection. Ecuador's also refused a visit by Human Rights Watch General Counsel and Assange's lawyers, stating that Ecuador has been widely condemned by the human rights community for their treatment of Assange. Assange's lawyers are also looking to challenge the moves that the Ecuadorian government took to censor his freedom of speech and freedom of association, and by an extension of that, his freedom of opinion. I mean, these moves that Ecuador took required visitors of Assange to disclose their own social media usernames and serial numbers on phones and tablets to the Ecuadorian government so they can share that information with other agencies. And they can also seize the property of Assange or his visitors without a warrant and just hand it over to the UK authorities. I mean, on the whole, this lawsuit is focusing on his isolation and strict restrictions put on him and his visitors, and an overall failure to meet international obligations concerning human rights. Now, the chief fear for Assange is extradition to the US for publishing huge amounts of classified information, and this doesn't just go back to 2016. This goes all the way back to the Afghanistan and the Iraq wars, and diplomatic memos decades old at this point. I mean, this clearly made the US intel agencies furious. Now, it was only last month Assange planned to escape Britain and flee to Russia. Assange tried to gain a visa to Russia back in 2010, but the same day that his letter was sent to Russia looking for a visa, Interpol, the international police, issued a red notice seeking Assange's arrest, essentially squashing any chance he had of actually relocating to Russia. And this was also the day after he had released the first batch of US State Department files. Of course, things get interesting here because this gives the Democrats fuel to want to bring down Assange by saying that the Russians sent him all of these emails that they've hacked from Hillary Clinton and her associates. But don't forget Vault 7, which showed that the CIA can impersonate foreign governments, and they specifically name Russia. And now Mueller's claiming that he traced a hacker all the way back to the Russian GRU, which isn't something he's even capable of doing. And CrowdStrike, the private firm that had the rare honor of examining the DNC's servers, said that it was Russia that hacked them, despite all of CrowdStrike's ties to Perkins Coie and Eric Schmidt and Bruce Orr and Hillary Clinton and many other sketchy figures of the Democratic Party. So excuse me for not just accepting CrowdStrike's word. Excuse me for questioning Mueller's findings and trusting Assange. I think it's quite clearly time to pardon Assange and remove the fear of extradition to the US, because he says that is what's keeping him from leaving the embassy. Now, Ecuador is looking to accelerate their moves to strip Assange of his Ecuadorian citizenship because Article 79 of Ecuador's constitution forbids extradition of citizens. So they're trying to remove his citizenship so he can be extradited. And it seems to me like pardoning Assange is this wild card that Trump can play at any time that's advantageous to him to just gain massive support. I mean, knowing what we know about Trump, he has no reason to have hard feelings against Assange despite what's been said publicly. And I'm not saying that Trump wants to pardon Assange, but he couldn't say that Assange should be pardoned even if he believed it. I mean, the media would tear him and Assange to shreds even more than they already do, and it would create an absolute disaster. I mean, this is an instance where I see completing the action and then letting people clue themselves in as to what's really going on as being a more strategic way of pulling all of this off. And the more spontaneous it seems, the more emotional support will be drummed up for Trump. And again, like I said, he'll want to use that to his advantage. But not everyone in the US is particularly pleased with Assange. That's why there's been this letter sent to Ecuadoran President Lenin Moreno, dated just 3 days ago, with praises being thrown at Moreno, and then the reality that they just see Assange as a roadblock to progress. They're very concerned about Assange's presence at the Ecuadorian embassy and his citizenship. But in particular, they were disturbed to learn that the government restored Assange's internet access. They exclaim how he's released damaging documents, particularly concerning the 2016 election, because they want people voting for a corrupt politician. They're only upset because her corruption and the corruption of her associates, and truly a huge part of the entire political party, were exposed. And then they call Assange a dangerous criminal and a threat to global security. It's truly disgusting how these people think of Assange as a criminal for peeling back the veil of corruption that's been plaguing governments and entire populations for decades. Oh, and I should also mention that this letter came from Eliot Engel, a Democrat of New York, and Ileana Ros-Latinen, a Republican from Florida. So remember these names, as badly as I might have pronounced the second one, and make them pay at the voting booth for being such scummy human beings. I mean, perhaps Wikileaks should see if they can get documents from these people and expose the corruption that these people are involved in. I mean, after their obvious concerns over Assange being kept safe and their lack of care for truth, this is at least more reason to look in their direction than not. So that's all for this video. I hope to be able to one day report on Assange being pardoned in the US and accepted here to do his work with the full protection of the US Constitution. I mean, I, as an American, can only do so much to help Assange, but voting for people who see Assange as a hero rather than a criminal is a start. And it's nice to see this Assange debate starting to leak into the crevices of the US government, because it's like a light bulb casting a light on all of the disgusting filth that we haven't cleaned out yet. So